in a gun battle. Sources said that the gunmen invaded community around 5 p.m., shooting as residents fled into the forest for safety. Bonyadi came into the limelight in 2014 after Boko Haram insurgents killed 58 male students of the town Federal Government College. ISWAP is in a notice seen by Sarah reporters on Monday said that 10 people were killed, including soldiers and children, during the attack, and the terror group added that it raised many military operational vehicles. And since the death of JAS leader Abubakar Shekau, ISWAP has been consolidating its grip in locations around Lake Chad. Just recently, it appointed Wali Sani Shuwaram, a 45-year-old, as the new leader Wali of ISWAP in Lake Chad. The sect's membership has swollen with the defection of hundreds of Boko Haram fighters under Shekau, saying that the Nigerian army has repeatedly claimed that insurgency has been largely defeated and frequently underplays any losses. The terror group has caused over 50,000 deaths and displaced millions of individuals, mainly in Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states. And this is the news about how Boko Haram members are killing the Nigerian soldiers and children in Yobe state, and also claiming responsibility for every of these deaths. Muhammadu Buhari was seen as the nemesis of corrupt politicians, and that image, which could not help him during previous electoral attempts, was capitalized on by Southwest media to burnish and garnish a political reputation against an admittedly helplessly gutless and hapless leadership of Goodluck Jonathan. But history is a mercilessly ruthless judge. While previously clueless and corrupt, Jonathan has become a beautiful bride of international diplomacy and democratic behavior. The anti-corruption warrior is now mired in a government that, by its own reckoning, has become the most inept and corrupt in our history. To be fair, the president did not promise much in the electioneering campaigns in both elections. Throughout the campaigns, his mantra, repeated like a broken record, was fighting corruption, insurgency, and improving the economy. His performance on all three counts is suspect, dubious, and undistinguished. Most people would even declare him a failure. By its own admission, even the government does not point to any of them as its main achievement, which is curious. To it, their greatest achievement is building infrastructure, which was a kind of an afterthought, as it never featured in its 2015 election campaigns. The curiosity is, how could one major in a subject on which he was not tested in an examination? On his greatest failure, agreement will be as difficult to reach. Insecurity has become a major menace in the country, and no part of his nation is spared. But because that is not his greatest failure, nor is the crumbling economy, which he was never given a chance in the first place. It has never been this bad since the war, and although President Muhammadu Buhari was elected to deal with the problem of insurgency in the northeast, his regime was added the nefarious activities of herdsmen and now bandits, who have not only made life brutally short and unbearable for most rural communities, especially farmers who have abandoned their farms, which has led to the threat of food scarcity and hunger in the country. The Nigerians are paying such humongous price on account of corruption in the public service in a government that promised to stamp it out. Is a monumental indictment of President Muhammadu Buhari and his legitimacy for the office. The paradox is that for every extra kobo that goes into fictitious projects and salaries, there is a corresponding denial of public-oriented spending to improve people's lives. Also, such increase in recurrent spending is directly responsible for the unending borrowing by this government to fund its acclaimed infrastructure development in a situation that mortgages the future of the country and the next generation. Consequently, the reason we are borrowing is not entirely because there is no money, as government has consistently maintained, but because its employees are siphoning the money into their private pockets at the expense of the generality of Nigerians. The obvious implication of this development is that the current anti-corruption strategy is defective and inappropriate. Thinking that the main culprit in corruption and the political office holders. This view featured heavily in Buhari's approach in dealing with members of the Second Republic political class. But it is simply untenable because the political class does not have accounting powers, which belongs to the career civil servants. So it is financially impossible for the politicians to steal money from government coffers without the active involvement and collusion of the bureaucrats themselves. Also, for a minister or commissioner to steal a dime, the bureaucrat must be involved. Entire budgets of the country through the manners of expenditure. They also prepare the budget. Therefore, we have to revise and change the approach and train searchlight more on the public servants to actually get to the root of the matter. And also, focusing on the few political office holders is a waste of time and resources, which has been proved by the failure of this government to stamp out corruption in the country, and there is need to digitalize government processes to reduce human interference, which ultimately conduces for corruption. But most importantly, government must improve the remuneration of public servants to motivate them and discourage corrupt practices. However, it is necessary to properly determine the right workforce in the country. And this evidence from the COVID-19 measures, which has kept level 1 to level 13 workers, constituting over 85% of the personnel at home for over a year, shows that most of them are not really needed. And this is the reason why it is better for the government to focus more on how to further ensure that the civil workers are actually, given much more support so that they can be motivated, and therefore, the practices of the corrupt practices would actually be extremely minimal, if not stopped entirely. And this would help us to ensure that the root of corruption is actually destroyed. Thanks for listening.